Every single day, we do things that destroy our brain function. Obviously, these are things that we need to stop doing because with the number of people that are being diagnosed with stress-related illness, which does come back to brain function, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, autoimmunity, there are a ton of things that are linked back to stress that we're suffering from. If we can get our brain function optimized, that's going to help us do it. So today we're going to talk about really 5.5 things you can do to stop destroying your brain on a daily basis and help you prevent that in the future. I'm Dr. Jeff Cumro, and in my office we work on getting the hardware and the software of the program working as well as it possibly can. When we do that, we have a functional computer, right? We have the things that we need to get us through the day, and whatever environment we're in, we have the product that we need. But when we don't have the hardware, the brain and the body working as well as they can, and we don't have the software, the energetic system to supply it with the energy that it needs to take that next step, we struggle. It may not be in all scenarios. We may just struggle in learning. We may just struggle in stress. We may just struggle in our career, whatever it may be, but we're not as optimized as we should be, and we're not going to enjoy the life that we want you to enjoy. So that's ultimately what we do. Let's go ahead and dive into the top 5 things that we do on a daily basis that are destroying our brain function and what you can do to avoid the same fate. So number 1, diet. And we're going to go over 2 things inside of this. And diet is one thing that is very, very important. You know, when you talk about fitness, they say it's 80% diet, 20% what you do as far as exercise goes. And I would say that's a pretty accurate thing. It's not much different in the brain. We have to have those energetic sources. We have to have the fuel source supplying enough energy to allow us to do the things that we need to do. Now, the one that most people probably think that we're going to go over, and we are, is carb load, right? If our blood sugar gets too high, that damages our brain. That insulin in the system is damaging to our brain. And the other thing that goes with this is as you get that insulin level, you get more cortisol, and that is the other thing that starts to damage your brain. So you start getting in this spiral. The brain does run off of glucose, so it's important to have some glucose for it, but your body can usually make energetic sources that are needed to actually fuel that brain. So we don't need as many carbs as what most people think. Now the bad thing about this is they call Alzheimer's type 3 diabetes because in most cases diabetes leads to that. It makes it worse and it continues to exacerbate it. So decreasing your carb and getting your blood sugar under control are going to be very, very good things you can do. The second one we're going to talk about is one that might come off a little unpopular, but we're going to cover it anyway because it's important to know. Vegetarians or vegans specifically are going to have a little bit harder time maintaining and restoring brain health than those who are not vegans or vegetarians. Why is that? When we look at brain health, we have to have healthy omega-3 fatty acids, and the omega-3 fatty acids are stereotypically from fish sources. So if we're not taking any kind of fish, it makes it very difficult to get those. Now, what is the myelin sheath? The myelin sheath is the stuff that improves transmission of a nerve signal. So if you imagine an extension cord, you've got the wire inside, and then you've got the orange coating or whatever color your extension cord is on the outside. That's how I want you to imagine your myelin sheath. It's the nerve covering that makes things more efficient. As we have that insulation around there, we don't leak as much nervous tissue or as much of that nervous signal, and with that, more optimized signaling. It's faster, it works better in general. Now, some people might argue with me that you can get DHA from algae sources, and this is 100% true. But the algal forms of DHA are much more susceptible to peroxidation, and peroxidation is a good way to look at this. Is like when you take something in, you want it to be optimized, right? You want it to be as good as possible. And the browning on an apple is an example of peroxidation. It's the rusting, the aging, all of those things. And it doesn't matter how you put it. Either way, rust is bad, right? Aging is bad. Anytime we look at this, it's not a good thing. When we take in peroxidized fatty acids, it causes a toxicity in our body, and that can actually be more damaging than going without the fatty acids. So it is much better to get these from a fish source, and that's why I'm saying vegetarianism is very, very difficult, and veganism specifically, it's very, very difficult to retain your brain function, but it's even harder to restore your brain function because in most cases that is something that we're going to need to restore brain health if you are struggling with something. Moving on to number 2, let's talk about exercise. Exercise is something that's very, very important for brain function, and there are a multitude of ways that this is important. But the number one thing with this is that as you move, as you exercise, you get extra stimulation to the brain. The different movements that we make, the different pathways that we stimulate as we go through that. You know, as you move through space, as you're running forward, you have to use your eyes, you have to use your balance, you have to use all of these different systems in the brain, and we get those networks more and more coordinated as we exercise. The more varied your exercises, the more likely you are to hit a variety of those networks that are going to maintain a broader spectrum of your networks. And ultimately, what does this look like? When people develop Alzheimer's or they develop Parkinson's or different things like that, they lose a specific function, right? They don't lose all functions. Man. Excuse me. They don't lose all functions. They only lose a few specific functions. And the whole purpose of this is the more robust our brain is, the more likely we are to retain those systems. The more robust our brain is, the better we're going to be able to handle aging, to withstand aging without losing a certain function. So, like I said, the more varied your exercise is, the better off you're going to be with this. Now, other thing with exercise is it increases blood flow to the brain. It increases the blood pressure and different things like this. It increases the metabolic pathways that can help better fuel your brain on a more consistent basis. So it's not just the stimulation of moving through space or moving in different types of movements. It's all of it. We have multiple effects from exercise. The great thing, it's never too late to exercise. A lot of studies show, you know, if you're 85 and you start exercising, you're still getting the benefit to that. And arguably, you might be getting benefits faster than what you're getting at a younger age. So it might affect the brain function more quickly. So you'll have to do it for a couple weeks to get that brain function. Does that mean you could get away with only doing it for a couple weeks? No, you have to continue it to get those benefits. But it can be something you see the effects of that much more quickly than somebody that is in their prime doing those exercises. Number 3. Let's talk about alcohol. Alcohol is something that is, let's see, how do I put this? There's a lot of confusion about alcohol. A lot of people look at it and they say, well, you know, it says that people that drink a little bit are less susceptible to Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. Might be true. They say that it's good for your heart health. Might be true. But what's good for your heart health isn't necessarily good for your brain health. And I hate how siloed we've gotten in the medical system. And you'll have cardiologists that are telling you to do something that is terrible for the brain. You'll have, you know, people that are looking solely at the brain and they're like, do this, but it's bad for another system. And we've got to have a little bit more understanding and interdepartmental, you know, cooperation to get the best optimal output for you. Now, why can alcohol be good for the brain? It loosens up blood flow, right? It opens up those blood vessels and it can help get blood in places that it wasn't getting before. But when you take alcohol, it breaks down fats, right? So fats dissolve in alcohol. If you take a vial of alcohol and you drop in a couple droplets of fat, it all dissolves. Whereas if you take a vial of water, you drop in that fat, it sits there and it floats and that fat is separated, right? Alcohol is toxic to fats is the simple way of looking at this. What is your brain made of? A lot of it is fat. Alcohol in general is not good for your health as far as brain function goes. So it might be good for heart function. It's not good for brain function. So in my book, I totally eliminate it. It's just not worth it. So you may be in a different boat on that. That's something you're going to have to decide. But alcohol can be something that destroys brain function. Wrong types of stimulation is number 4. And what do I mean by the wrong types of stimulation? We often look to simple stimulation to get the things that we need. So we are having a bad day, we need a little bit of a dopamine hit. We don't go and exercise to get that dopamine hit. We don't go and talk to a spouse or a loved one or anything like that. Instead, we look to our phone, and that phone gives us that dopamine, that stimulation of blue light. The scrolling up stimulates dopamine. All of those things give you activation in your system, and that's what you're craving when you're having a bad day, right? But that stimulation is quick and easy to get. So if you listen to experts like Benjamin Hardy, he talks about not getting on your phone in the morning, not checking Facebook and different things like that. Because when we look at Facebook, we look at that and we say, man, we had 1,000 people look at that photo. That's pretty cool. That's rewarding to you, right? But it's not a good reward because it doesn't do anything to move you forward. Instead, if you get some tasks done, if you get some things marked off your to-do list that are a little bit more important in the perspective of moving you forward in your career, in your family life, in whatever areas that you want to move forward to, that's going to give you the type of stimulation that you really need and want. So the wrong types of stimulation actually destroy brain function over time. There are a lot of studies out there that show how much blue light damages our brain function, and especially when we talk about sleep, which is actually going to be number 5. So when we look at blue light, it decreases the quality of your sleep. And not getting enough sleep is one of the fastest ways to destroy your brain health. Why? If you're not getting enough sleep, then you increase the amount of cortisol that's in your system. As you increase that cortisol, sooner or later it overrides the system and it says, we just have to work on survival. So it doesn't work on healing, repairing, it doesn't work on learning, it doesn't work on any of these other things. It's solely focused on survival. When you have that cortisol, that adrenaline rush, it's really hard to get to sleep because you're sitting there and you're exhausted, but you lay down and you're wired because you can't go to sleep. Your body is trying to keep you going just to keep you surviving, because the whole purpose of that stress system is to help you survive in a situation. If you view anything as a threat, then you're not going to go to sleep. Same thing here. As you're going through your days and you got that stress system turned on, it activates you so you can survive it. Hard to turn that off and get to sleep. The other aspect of this is a change in your sleep schedule can be very, very damaging on this. And you see this in people that are working swing shifts and overnight shifts and different things like that. There's metabolic changes. If they're swinging back and forth between they're essentially giving themselves jet lag. The change in the amount of time that you're doing this is the amount of jet lag that you have. So if you travel across 3 time zones, it takes you 3 days to recover from that. It's what the research shows. Don't ask me, it's what the research shows, right? So if you are switching your sleep schedule by 8, 10, 12 hours, it's going to take you a week to 2 weeks to recover from that. That's significant, right? Because a lot of times people on the swing shift, they're working for 2 weeks on one schedule and then they're going 2 weeks on the other schedule. They don't ever recover from that. They're constantly in a sleep deprivation that fires up that cortisol that we just talked about and helps destroy their brain function. So they are more susceptible to metabolic issues. They're more susceptible to all the chronic lifestyle diseases because stress leads to that. They're more susceptible to Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. It's a sad fact, but it does happen. And we're going to talk about one last one. Like I said, I promised you 5. We're going to go 5.5 because somebody asked me about this earlier this week in practice, and it's something that's important to know. Contact sports, and we're not just talking about concussions here. We're talking about subconcussive forces as well. So each time that somebody plays tackle football and they hit heads together, they get a subconcussive force. Over time, those subconcussive forces lead to the same amount of damage as a concussive force. And it's pretty apparent right now how damaging concussions are to brain health, right? It's become blatantly obvious in the last decade and a half here how damaging it is. We see all those people that are getting diagnosed with CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy. They're going crazy and doing things that they would never do because their brain isn't functioning as well as it should. They get junk built up in there and they can't process things in the proper way. So they end up doing things that they wouldn't stereotypically do. And you see an increase in ALS. It's sad. You see an increase in Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. All of these different things are happening with these subconcussive forces. And the question that was posed to me is, why don't we have kids doing tackle football around here? That's why. It's because we found out how bad it is. And especially when they are developing their brain really, really bad. These things are even more traumatic to the developing brain. So if you're an adult, these things can hurt you. If you're a kid, they can change your life. So I hope that helps you. Obviously, I appreciate your time and attention. I know those are your most valuable resources. Please give me a like and subscribe if it does help you, as it gives me better information on what we can provide you to take that next step forward in your life. So I love you. I appreciate you. I hope you have a great week, and I will catch you next week.